What's up, everybody? Welcome to Detailed Comics Shelf Appeal, a story where I go over my most recent purchases and, give you an idea of what I'm reading as well as what you might want to be reading. Looks like Civil War is going to come off in a big way. This lovely copy of the Daily Bugle, which gives you rundowns of all the upcoming tie-ons from Marvel's Civil War 2, their big summer event. Next, being the big Amazing Spider-Man fan that I am, I picked up Amazing Spider-Man 1.5, a tie-in to the 6-part Amazing Grace storyline. Bit of a completionist in me since it doesn't really relate too terribly much to the ongoing story in the main book. Next, we have Carnage number 8. So Carnage is actually a pretty interesting book. It's one of those things where I feel like it's Marvel's modern interpretation of a horror comic. It's interesting to see Carnage outside of his element inside the Spider-Man books, and it's funny because you have Eddie Brock as Toxin really taking on a protagonist kind of role, and J. Jonah Jameson III, or John Jameson, aka Manwolf, he's also taking on that kind of anti-hero protagonist role as well. It's a book that, I don't know, it's not really getting a whole lot of readership by the issues that it's been selling, but ultimately it's something that I kind of find entertaining. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it on the pull list, but for now it's there. It's got a pretty solid place. Then we get into Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange number 8 is an ongoing piece of the Last Days of Magic storyline. Last Days of Magic deals with the Empirical. The Empirical is a mechanical force that's going around the multiple dimensions, exterminating all sources of magic. You find people like Doctor Doom, Scarlet Witch, and a whole host of other magical characters kicking around with Doctor Strange trying to find the last remnants of magic inside this universe. Overall, Jason Aaron has done a phenomenal job writing Doctor Strange because the storyline itself is extremely compelling. For people that are looking to get into the series prior to Marvel's upcoming Doctor Strange movie, I would highly suggest going back to number 1 and picking this up. Then we get into Totally Awesome Hulk number 6. So Totally Awesome Hulk is the story of Amadeus Cho, who has transitioned into the role of the Hulk, taking the essence of being the Hulk from Bruce Banner. It's one of those things where we haven't really found out where Bruce Banner is at this point in time. Amadeus Cho has got a very different take on the Hulk. He's very much he's not really a rage machine, but trying to, give out the good and, concentrate on using the power and potential of the Hulk for saving the day. He always felt like he was a very underappreciated hero, and he wants to set the record right. In this story, we kind of see a confrontation between, Jane Foster Thor as well as the Hulk, and it's got an interesting kind of play on things, but you realize that Amadeus may or may not be in control all the time, or nearly as much as he feels like. Again, this is another story that I really recommend. If you go back to number 1, you're going to really enjoy it. Written by Greg Pak, and Mr. Pak is the person that brought us Planet Hulk, and then later installments of World War Hulk. Now we also get into another Jason Aaron story, the Mighty Thor number 7. So in the Mighty Thor number 7, we see the second part of an ongoing tale basically being told by Loki to the reader. And it's really his recounting of a classical confrontation between Baldorf the Black. It's not necessarily a powerful tale, and ultimately it's got a lot of parallels to where the Hulk's at in his storyline, and it's really kind of making up for the fact that Jane Foster is doing double duty, parading around as Thor in issues like Gwenpool and, Totally Awesome Hulk, and various other places where she's kind of featured in that. So it's really kind of like that stopgap. The first arc of the Mighty Thor was really good, and ultimately this is like a nice transition into where the next lineup is going to go. I'm really kind of interested to see where this ends up after this. Then one of the things that I picked up, because we're going into a very Rebirth heavy week next week, is I picked up Action Comics 51, which is the third part of the Final Days of Superman. I picked up Superman and Wonder Woman number 29, which is part 7 of the Final Days of Superman. And then Superman 52, which is the last part of the Final Days of Superman. I know that I've got a few gaps in this whole lineup as far as the Final Days of Superman goes. If you want to get a feel for how Peter J. Tomasi is going to be writing the upcoming Superman Rebirth titles, the Final Days of Superman is a great way to get in touch with how he feels about Superman himself. Because I've been hearing all over the place that people are like, man, New 52 Superman sucks, I can't really get into it, he's selfish. And really what Peter J. Tomasi, who took over Superman, Wonder Woman about issue 13, early 2015, he's really kind of taken the character back to its roots. What the essence of Superman is. And he's much more likable, much more relatable. He's a much better character in these Final Days of Superman books. So I recommend grabbing all the tie-ins, and really it's back to basics for Superman. On the recommendation of Sal from Comic Pop, I picked up a couple issues of Superman American Alien. So I picked up Superman American Alien number 3, Superman American Alien number 4, and then I also picked up Superman American Alien Volume 7. Superman American Alien is a very interesting story, and it's really more about Clark Kent than it is actually Superman himself. Max Landis has done a really great job of setting up this whole story frame, and inside 7 issues you really get a feel for the kind of struggle and place that Superman is in at various points in his life, including, I mean, if you're going to read one issue, read issue 3, because issue 3 is awesome. Issue 7 is also great too, and it's awesome for a different reason, because you see like a little freewheeling kind of like college age Clark Kent before he becomes a reporter and things like that in issue 3, and it introduces you to Batman, and it's really kind of, it's a super cool concept. And then Superman 7, Superman American Alien number 7, that's really kind of a take on how Superman decides to be Superman. It's more of a Clark Kent transitioning into Superman. As if he was Batman going off into darkness for 20 years, becoming this phenomenal detective and martial artist, and then coming back to Gotham. This is Superman being Clark Kent. And then, because I don't know if I'm a glutton for punishment or not, I picked up Hyperion number 2 as well as Hyperion number 3. So the Hyperion books have a lot of potential, but unfortunately it doesn't feel like they're really living up to them. I'm not really a big fan of where this story arc is going at this point in time. I feel like they could have gone in a little bit better direction. Here's hoping that they turn it around, but based on the numbers for the sales figures, I don't really feel like it's going to make it past like book 6 or 7. I just don't know if it's gonna kind of take it that far. Then we kind of get into a very new DC title. I have Scooby Apocalypse. So Scooby Apocalypse is very interesting, particularly this one. I dig Velma. Everybody's got a Daphne and things like that, but as far as, it's like, give me a techie, geeky kind of, super cool chick, and the variant cover just kind of spoke to me versus like the regular cover. And this is a story based on a concept by Jim Lee. Very little writing, very little art. The character designs and things like that, they were all, they were Jim Lee, but ultimately this book wasn't really a Jim Lee creation. So it's very cool the way the story's developing. So I'm probably going to give it another shot for another issue. I don't necessarily know how long it's going to stay there. It's definitely not going to go out of the pull list, but it's something that I'll be like, okay, maybe I'll grab issue 2, maybe I'll grab issue 3, and we'll kind of keep it touch and go for there. So after Scooby Apocalypse, we get into one of the most controversial comics, and that would be Captain America's Steve Rogers number 1. And it's primarily controversial because of the twist at the end. And it's one of those things where there are people that are up in arms, about what happened to Captain America, because they feel like they trample on the essence of what Steve Rogers is. And in reality, it's just like, hey man, it could be a really interesting story. That's the whole purpose of where that's going to go. And if you look at the story and you look at the beginning of it, the way that this whole twist comes about could really entertain some very timey-wimey kind of concepts. You've got to remember that Steve Rogers, who just became young again by the power of a 4-year-old girl that embodies a cosmic cube, anything could really happen. If you're talking about a book where I'm probably going to pick up issue number 2 simply because of the last page reveal, it's because Nick Spencer is leading me down a road like, holy crap! I didn't really see that coming. As soon as, it happened, I was like, oh, this is going to be interesting. Because Captain America was never really a super interesting character to me. He's got a great sense of morals and great moral compass, but ultimately I never found him to be like, my favorite character. I was always, like I said, a big, amazing Spider-Man kind of guy. But overall, Nick Spencer got me. He's got the hook in me for that one. And then we get into another number 1 from Marvel, and that would be Nighthawk. So Nighthawk number 1 is it's not good. It's one of those things where if we're talking about Nighthawk is essentially the Squadron Supreme's version of Batman. And what they do is they take all the essence of Batman in terms of he's a billionaire, millionaire, technological kind of guy. He's got all these gadgets, and he's got a bat cycle or he's got a motorcycle. and they give him all the cool stuff. But then they take away one of the best parts about Batman is that Batman, even though he can be kind of a dick, you know, he can be a not great person. They give him a moral sensibility that keeps him from breaking his one rule. And his one rule is that he doesn't kill people. You know, he tries his best not to kill people. He has in the past, you know, we can debate that. But when it comes to Nighthawk, you take away that redeeming characteristic. And it's very apparent as you go through the issue that part of him, you know, that humanizing factor, that redeemability that goes along with Batman, despite, you know, he's basically a brutal vigilante running around breaking people in half. If you take away that kind of moral compass, it doesn't really make for as compelling a character as you'd really like to see. So Nighthawk, I picked it up because I wanted to, and then I realized that I probably shouldn't have, and that's where we're at with that one. And then we get down to the big daddy of the comic books, the other one that was giving Captain America Steve Rogers the run for its money, and that's going to be DC Rebirth #1. So DC Rebirth #1, this is the variant cover. DC Rebirth #1 it's not the reboot that everybody was expecting. It's actually more of like a retelling of how things have happened in the past, and it's through the eyes of a very fan-favorite kind of character. I know people all over the place are spoiling this, so it's not really a huge deal, but I still kind of feel like if you're out there and you haven't read DC Rebirth, that I kind of want to have you experience it for yourself, because there's a really great moment between two characters, and it's just like, oh, and you know, it got a little bit of weepiness, you know, but it's overall, I find that it's a really compelling reason for me to get into DC, and that's good because DC hasn't really been my favorite in terms of comic books. What I like about Rebirth is that Rebirth takes these kind of components and it introduces us to some of these artists, and it takes this story arc through things, and then there's a twist at the end that kind of harkens back to earlier days. And it's very interesting as to how that's going to play out. You know, are we looking at an antagonist, or, you know, like a secondary antagonist? Are we looking at, you know, how is this whole modification of the DC universe to become what is or was the New 52? How do we resolve that? You know, how does everything kind of fit and, you know, make its way back into place? It's like an exploded version of a watch that somehow magically comes back together again. Who knows how it happens, who knows who does it, but ultimately, this is going to make for some very compelling titles that are coming up. So I'm going to be doing a show called Rebirth Rundown, and Rebirth Rundown is going to take us through every first issue of the Rebirth titles, as well as the first issue of the ongoing series after that, because there are some stylistic changes that will be happening through those. But ultimately, we're going to break down every single Rebirth title as it comes out, and tell you whether it's something to pick up, put on your pull list, or, you know, maybe pick it up for issue 1, or maybe pass on it altogether. So that's it for this episode of Shelf Appeal. Hit the like button if you like the video, and hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this from me regarding comics and cinema, books, news, basically anything and everything, you know, to try and help you absorb the information that's coming from the world of comics today.